Sarah Martinez had always been different from other kids in her small Texas town. While other children played games, she studied maps and read military history books. Her father, a retired sergeant, noticed her unusual interest and encouraged her studies. Sarah dreamed of serving her country. But growing up in the 1982, she knew the military world was tough for women. At 18, Sarah joined the Army as a private. The training was brutal, but she pushed through every challenge. Male soldiers often looked down on her, making jokes about women in combat. Sarah never responded to their taunts. She simply worked harder than anyone else. Her dedication caught the attention of her commanding officers. Years passed, and Sarah climbed the ranks slowly but steadily. She earned her college degree through military programs and attended officer training school. Each promotion brought new challenges and more responsibility. Sarah served in multiple deployments, proving herself in dangerous situations. She saved lives, led successful missions, and earned the respect of those who served under her. By her mid-30s, Sarah had become a major. She was known throughout the military for her strategic mind and leadership skills. However, she often worked in intelligence and special operations, areas where her real identity was kept secret for security reasons. This meant that many regular military personnel had never heard of her or her accomplishments. Sarah's expertise in counterterrorism and international relations made her valuable to high-level operations. She spoke 4 languages fluently and had spent years studying enemy tactics. Her superiors recognized her unique talents and began assigning her to increasingly important missions. But these assignments often required her to work undercover or in classified roles. During one particularly sensitive operation, Sarah had to pose as a civilian contractor. She spent months gathering intelligence while pretending to be a simple office worker. The mission was successful, but it meant she missed several public military ceremonies where her achievements might have been recognized. Her face remained unknown to most soldiers in the regular army. As Sarah entered her 40s, she reached the rank of lieutenant colonel, then full colonel. Her service record was impressive, filled with commendations and successful operations. But because of the classified nature of her work, few people knew about her real accomplishments. To most soldiers, she was just another officer they might pass in the hallway. The Army leadership saw Sarah's potential for even greater things. They recommended her for advanced training at the War College and special leadership programs. Sarah excelled in every course, studying advanced military strategy and international policy. Her instructors noted her exceptional analytical skills and natural leadership abilities. Sarah's personal life had taken a back seat to her military career. She had never married, dedicating herself completely to serving her country. Some colleagues whispered that she was too focused on work, but Sarah didn't mind. She had found her calling, and nothing would distract her from it. When Sarah turned 45, she received news that would change everything. She was selected for promotion to brigadier general, making her one of the youngest female generals in Army history. The promotion was kept quiet initially due to ongoing classified operations she was involved in. Only a small circle of high-ranking officials knew about her new rank. The ceremony was small and private, held in a secure briefing room at the Pentagon. Sarah's parents attended, finally able to see their daughter receive the recognition she deserved. Her father, now in his 70s, wore his old Army uniform and saluted his daughter with tears in his eyes. Sarah's mother had always worried about her daughter's dangerous career, but now she felt immense pride. As Brigadier General Martinez, Sarah was assigned to oversee multiple special operations units. Her new position required her to travel frequently between different military installations. She often wore civilian clothes or standard military fatigues, without her general's stars to maintain operational security. This meant that lower-ranking soldiers rarely realized they were in the presence of a general officer. Sarah's work focused on developing new strategies for modern warfare and terrorism prevention. She worked closely with intelligence agencies and international partners. Her days were filled with classified briefings, strategic planning sessions, and coordination meetings. The weight of responsibility was enormous, but Sarah thrived under pressure. One aspect of Sarah's new role was inspecting various military facilities and units. These visits were usually unannounced, to get an honest assessment of readiness and morale. Sarah would arrive dressed casually, observing how different units operated when they thought no high-ranking officers were watching. These visits gave her valuable insights into the real state of military preparedness. During one such visit to Fort Braxton, a large Army base in North Carolina, Sarah decided to observe the morning training exercises. She wore simple military fatigues without any rank insignia, wanting to blend in with the regular soldiers. Her goal was to assess the quality of training and leadership at the battalion level. The base was bustling with activity as soldiers prepared for their daily exercises. Sarah walked around the training areas, taking mental notes about equipment conditions, soldier morale, and the effectiveness of the training programs. Everything seemed to be running smoothly, and she was impressed with what she observed. As Sarah continued her inspection, she noticed a group of soldiers struggling with a particularly challenging obstacle course. Their commanding officer, a colonel named James Wheeler, was shouting instructions and criticisms at the soldiers. Sarah moved closer to observe the training methods being used. Colonel Wheeler was a tall, imposing man with a loud voice and an aggressive demeanor. He had been in the Army for 20 years and was known for his tough approach to training. Wheeler believed that soldiers needed to be pushed to their limits to be effective in combat. His methods were controversial, but his superiors tolerated them because his units usually performed well in evaluations. Sarah watched as Wheeler berated a young female soldier who was having trouble with one of the obstacles. The colonel's language was harsh and demeaning, focusing more on the soldier's gender than on constructive feedback. Sarah felt her anger rising but remained silent, continuing to observe the situation unfold. The training session continued with Wheeler maintaining his aggressive approach. Several soldiers were clearly struggling, but instead of offering helpful guidance, the colonel continued his pattern of harsh criticism. Sarah made careful mental notes about what she was witnessing, knowing this information would be important for her assessment report. As the morning wore on, Sarah realized that Wheeler's leadership style was creating a toxic environment for the soldiers under his command. The fear and stress on their faces was obvious, and she could see that the training was becoming less effective because of the negative atmosphere. This was exactly the kind of problem her inspections were designed to identify. During the lunch break, Sarah decided to visit the base cafeteria to observe how soldiers interacted in a more relaxed setting. She grabbed a simple meal and sat at a table where she could listen to conversations and gauge the overall morale of the troops. The atmosphere was tense, with many soldiers discussing Colonel Wheeler's harsh training methods. Sarah overheard several soldiers expressing frustration with their commanding officer. They spoke in hushed tones about how Wheeler's constant criticism was affecting their confidence and performance. One young sergeant mentioned that several good soldiers had requested transfers to other units just to escape Wheeler's command. This information concerned Sarah greatly. As Sarah finished her meal, she noticed Colonel Wheeler entering the cafeteria with several other officers. He was speaking loudly about his training philosophy, boasting about how his tough methods produced superior soldiers. Wheeler seemed to enjoy being the center of attention, and his subordinates appeared to agree with him out of obligation, rather than genuine respect. Sarah decided to leave the cafeteria and continue her inspection of other facilities on the base. She visited the equipment storage areas, medical facilities, and administrative offices. Overall, the base was well maintained and efficiently run, but the problems with Wheeler's leadership style remained a significant concern in her assessment. Later that afternoon, Sarah returned to observe the final training session of the day. Wheeler was conducting a tactical exercise that required soldiers to work as a team to complete various objectives. Sarah positioned herself where she could watch the entire exercise while remaining unnoticed by the participants. The exercise began well, but Wheeler's interference quickly disrupted the soldiers' performance. Instead of allowing them to work through problems naturally, he constantly interrupted with criticism and corrections. His micromanagement was preventing the soldiers from developing the independent thinking skills they would need in real combat situations. During one particularly complex part of the exercise, a female lieutenant named Amy Johnson made a strategic decision that differed from Wheeler's preferred approach. Johnson was a West Point graduate with an excellent service record, but Wheeler immediately dismissed her idea without consideration. His public humiliation of the young officer was witnessed by all the soldiers in the unit. Sarah watched as Johnson's face reddened with embarrassment and frustration. The lieutenant had actually made a smart tactical choice, but Wheeler's ego prevented him from acknowledging it. Instead, he forced the unit to follow his predetermined plan, which proved less effective than Johnson's original suggestion. This incident perfectly illustrated the leadership problems Sarah had been observing. As the exercise continued, Sarah noticed that Wheeler seemed to particularly target female soldiers and junior officers for his harshest criticism. His behavior suggested a pattern of bias that was undermining unit cohesion and effectiveness. Sarah realized that this situation required immediate attention from higher command. When the training exercise ended, Wheeler gathered all the soldiers for a debriefing session. Instead of providing constructive feedback, he used the time to lecture about discipline and following orders without question. His approach was outdated and failed to recognize the importance of adaptive thinking in modern military operations. Sarah decided she had seen enough for the day and began walking toward the base headquarters to review her notes and prepare her preliminary assessment. As she walked across the base, she reflected on the serious leadership issues she had witnessed. Wheeler's command style was not only ineffective but potentially dangerous for soldiers who might serve under him in combat. The next morning, Sarah returned to continue her inspection. She wanted to observe Wheeler's leadership in different situations to ensure her assessment was comprehensive. Sarah arrived early and positioned herself to watch the morning formation and briefing session. Wheeler addressed his soldiers with the same aggressive tone she had observed the previous day. He announced that the unit would be conducting a special training exercise for visiting observers, though he didn't specify who those observers were. Sarah realized that word of her presence on the base might have reached Wheeler, but he obviously didn't know her true identity. During the morning training session, Sarah noticed that Wheeler seemed to be performing for an audience. His commands were even more dramatic than usual, and he made several comments about showing visitors what real military discipline looked like. It was clear that he was trying to impress whoever he thought was watching his unit. As Sarah observed the training, she saw Wheeler approach a young soldier who was struggling with equipment maintenance. Instead of offering help or guidance, Wheeler began loudly criticizing the soldier's competence. His voice carried across the entire training area, ensuring that everyone could hear his harsh words. The situation escalated when Wheeler noticed Sarah standing nearby, watching the training exercise. He assumed she was one of the visitors he was trying to impress, perhaps a civilian contractor or low-ranking administrator. Wheeler saw an opportunity to demonstrate his authority and decided to include Sarah in his performance. Wheeler strutted over to where Sarah was standing, his chest puffed out with self-importance. He looked her up and down dismissively, taking in her simple military fatigues and lack of visible rank insignia. In his mind, she was clearly someone of little importance who would be impressed by his commanding presence and military bearing. "You must be one of the visitors I was told about," Wheeler said loudly, making sure nearby soldiers could hear him. "I hope you're taking notes on how real military training is conducted. This is what discipline and leadership look like in the modern army." Sarah remained calm and simply nodded, not revealing her true identity. She was curious to see how far Wheeler would take his performance and wanted to observe his behavior when he thought he was in complete control of the situation. Her silence seemed to encourage Wheeler to continue his display. Wheeler began explaining his training philosophy to Sarah, speaking as if she were a civilian who knew nothing about military operations. His tone was condescending and dismissive, and he made several comments about how soft the military had become with all the modern emphasis on sensitivity and political correctness. "What we need is old-school discipline," Wheeler declared, gesturing toward his soldiers. "These young troops need to understand that following orders without question is what keeps them alive in combat. Too much thinking can be dangerous in the military." Sarah listened to Wheeler's outdated philosophy with growing concern. His approach was exactly opposite to what modern military doctrine emphasized. Today's soldiers needed to be adaptive, creative, and capable of independent thinking. Wheeler's methods would actually make his soldiers less effective and more vulnerable in real combat situations. As Wheeler continued his lecture, he began making increasingly inappropriate comments about female soldiers and their supposed limitations in military roles. He spoke as if Sarah would naturally agree with his prejudiced views, assuming that she shared his outdated attitudes about women in the military. "Don't get me wrong," Wheeler said with a smirk. "Some of these female soldiers try hard, but they just don't have what it takes for real military leadership. They're too emotional, too soft for the tough decisions that real combat requires. That's why experienced officers like me are so important." Sarah felt her anger building but maintained her calm exterior. Wheeler's comments revealed not only his personal prejudices but also his fundamental misunderstanding of modern military leadership requirements. His attitude was exactly the kind of thinking that held back military progress and effectiveness. Wheeler's confidence grew as he continued talking to Sarah, interpreting her silence as admiration for his expertise. He began sharing specific examples of what he considered his greatest leadership successes, most of which involved breaking down soldiers through harsh criticism, rather than building them up through positive reinforcement. "Just yesterday, I had to set straight a young lieutenant who thought she knew better than me," Wheeler boasted. "These college graduates come in thinking their fancy education makes them military experts. They need to learn that real experience beats book learning every time." Sarah recognized that Wheeler was referring to Lieutenant Johnson, whose tactical suggestion had actually been superior to his own plan. His inability to learn from subordinates or acknowledge good ideas from others revealed a dangerous level of ego and close-mindedness that had no place in modern military leadership. Wheeler then made a critical mistake that would define the rest of the encounter. Emboldened by what he perceived as Sarah's respectful attention, he decided to share his views on military hierarchy and the importance of respecting rank and experience. "The problem with today's military," Wheeler proclaimed, "is that people don't understand the chain of command anymore. Everyone thinks their opinion matters equally. But that's not how the military works. When someone like me gives an order, it should be followed without question, regardless of who's asking." Sarah finally spoke for the first time since Wheeler had approached her. "And what if the person you're giving orders to actually outranks you, Colonel?" she asked quietly. Wheeler laughed loudly, as if Sarah had made an amusing joke. "Well, that's not very likely in this situation, is it? I mean, look around you. I'm the ranking officer here, and it's pretty obvious that you're not military leadership material." The nearby soldiers had stopped their training to listen to the conversation. Something in Sarah's tone had caught their attention, and they sensed that the dynamics of the situation were about to change dramatically. Several of Wheeler's subordinate officers also moved closer, curious about what was developing. "What makes you so certain about my rank, Colonel Wheeler?" Sarah asked, her voice remaining calm but carrying a new edge of authority that made everyone within hearing distance pay closer attention. Wheeler's confidence faltered slightly, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. "Listen, miss, I don't know who you are or what civilian department you're from, but I've been in the Army for 20 years. I can spot military leadership from a mile away, and you're clearly not it." Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out her military identification card. She held it up so Wheeler could see it clearly, though she kept it positioned so that others couldn't read the details from a distance. Wheeler squinted at the card, and his face went through a series of expressions as he processed what he was seeing. The identification clearly showed Sarah's rank as Brigadier General, one star prominently displayed next to her name and photo. Wheeler's eyes widened as he read the card multiple times, unable to believe what he was seeing. His face turned pale, then red, then pale again as the implications of his behavior over the past 2 days began to sink in. That's not possible," Wheeler stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. You're a general? But you were just... I mean, you didn't say anything." Sarah put her identification away and looked directly at Wheeler. "I was conducting an inspection of this base, Colonel. I wanted to observe the training and leadership quality when officers thought they weren't being watched by higher command. Your performance has been very educational." The soldiers and officers who had gathered around could sense that something significant was happening, though most couldn't hear the specific words being exchanged. They could see Wheeler's body language change dramatically, from confident and aggressive to shocked and submissive. Wheeler's mind raced as he tried to remember everything he had said and done over the past 2 days. The harsh treatment of soldiers, the dismissive comments about female officers, The boasting about his outdated training methods, and especially his condescending lecture about military leadership to someone who actually outranked him by several levels. "General Martinez," Wheeler said, finally managing to speak coherently, "I had no idea. I mean, if I had known your rank, I would never have." Sarah cut him off with a firm but quiet voice. "The problem, Colonel, is that your behavior shouldn't change based on who you think is watching. A good leader treats all soldiers with respect and follows proper military protocols regardless of the audience." Wheeler attempted to salvage the situation with excuses and explanations. "Ma'am, I was just trying to demonstrate strong leadership for what I thought were civilian visitors. My training methods may seem harsh, but they produce results. My unit has consistently high performance ratings." Sarah had reviewed Wheeler's unit records as part of her inspection preparation. While his soldiers did perform adequately in formal evaluations, the unit also had higher than average transfer request rates and lower re-enlistment numbers. These statistics suggested that Wheeler's methods created short-term compliance but damaged long-term morale and retention. "Colonel Wheeler," Sarah said, her voice carrying the full authority of her rank, "effective leadership doesn't require humiliating subordinates or dismissing good ideas based on the gender or rank of who suggests them. The tactical suggestion Lieutenant Johnson made yesterday was actually superior to your predetermined plan." Wheeler's face showed his surprise that Sarah had observed and understood the specific tactical situation from the previous day. He realized that her inspection had been far more thorough and professional than he had imagined. She had been evaluating not just his training methods but his decision-making and leadership judgment. Sarah continued her assessment, speaking loud enough for the gathered soldiers to hear. "Modern military operations require adaptive thinking, collaborative leadership, and the ability to recognize good ideas regardless of their source. Your approach undermines unit cohesion and stifles the innovation we need in today's complex security environment." The nearby soldiers exchanged glances as they heard their concerns about Wheeler's leadership being articulated by a general officer. For months, they had felt that his methods were counterproductive, but they had no way to voice their concerns without risking their careers. Now they were witnessing a higher authority addressing these exact issues. Wheeler made one final attempt to defend his position. "With respect, ma'am, I've been using these training methods for years. They work because they prepare soldiers for the stress and pressure of real combat situations. Sometimes tough leadership is necessary." Sarah nodded thoughtfully before responding. "You're partially correct, Colonel. Soldiers do need to be prepared for stress and pressure, but effective stress training builds confidence and competence, while ineffective stress training breaks down morale and creates anxiety. Your methods fall into the latter category." She paused to let her words sink in before continuing. "Additionally, your comments about female soldiers and their capabilities suggest a fundamental misunderstanding of modern military doctrine and equal opportunity policies. These attitudes have no place in today's army." Wheeler stood silently, understanding that any further attempts to justify his behavior would only make the situation worse. He had been caught completely off guard by the revelation of Sarah's true rank and identity, and everything he had said and done was being evaluated by someone with the authority to end his career. Sarah made her final assessment clear and public. "Colonel Wheeler, you will report to base headquarters at 0800 tomorrow morning for a comprehensive review of your leadership practices and training methods. We will also be implementing immediate changes to ensure this unit receives the quality leadership these soldiers deserve." The gathered soldiers watched as their commanding officer was essentially relieved of his authority by a general he had unknowingly insulted and dismissed. The irony of the situation was not lost on anyone present. Wheeler's arrogance and prejudice had led him to humiliate himself in front of the very soldiers he had been trying to impress. As Sarah walked away from the training area, she could hear the soldiers beginning to discuss what they had just witnessed. Their voices carried a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and amazement at seeing their concerns validated by such a high-ranking officer who had taken the time to truly observe their situation. Wheeler remained standing alone in the training area, his authority shattered and his career in serious jeopardy. The soldiers under his command looked at him with a mixture of pity and justice satisfied. The officer who had spent years belittling others had been thoroughly humbled by his own ignorance and prejudice. General Martinez returned to base headquarters to complete her inspection report and begin the process of addressing the leadership problems she had identified. Her report would result in significant changes at Fort Braxton, including new leadership training programs and updated protocols for treating all soldiers with dignity and respect. The story of Colonel Wheeler's encounter with General Martinez spread quickly through military networks, serving as a powerful reminder that true military leadership requires humility, respect, and the wisdom to recognize that competence and authority can come in unexpected